Thank you, Iba, and to everyone who is serving on our stewardship team. And thank all of you. It is your gifts that not only equip and empower the First Unitarian Universalist Church of Nashville to fulfill its mission, they ensure continuance of a faith tradition that is open and inclusive of people with diverse faith backgrounds, a faith where there is room for believers and doubters, skeptics and heretics, room for upholders of tradition and those who question and challenge the prevailing orthodoxies of their time. Your gifts enable the presence of this liberating and life-affirming faith tradition here in Nashville. You are needed here in Nashville, in Middle Tennessee, now and into the future. You are truly the stars that make this ministry possible. The title of my sermon today is A Unitarian Universalist Theology of Resurrection. You may be asking, why this Sunday, not next? Why Palm Sunday, not Easter, which is the traditional celebration of the resurrection? I adhere to what the poet Wendell Berry suggests in his poem, Manifesto, the Mad Farmer Liberation Front, the ending line of which reads, "Practice resurrection." Every day, then, is a day to talk about resurrection. And before I go further, I have a little bit of a content warning, because I'm going to be directly quoting Hosea Ballou, one of our Universalist ancestors writing 250 years ago. His language in reference to God is male-gendered, patriarchal, and anthropomorphized. Language which is a reflection of the time in which he lived, the late 18th and early 19th centuries. Our faith and our language have evolved over the past 2.5 centuries, so I invite you to do your own translation for who or what God is for you. When I use the word God, it is as the ancient Chinese philosopher and author of the Tao Te Ching, Lao Tzu, said, "The Tao that can be named isn't the Tao." For me, God isn't God's name, but a written and spoken symbol for that unnameable, ineffable, ultimate, and transcendent source of our being. That's a mouthful. So today, the word God will suffice. So today, you are also likely to hear more God talk and mention of Jesus than is expected in this sanctuary. Holy Week on the Christian calendar begins with Palm Sunday and ends on Easter Sunday. The week begins with the triumphal entry of Jesus into Jerusalem. Riding on the back of a donkey, he is greeted with the waving of palm branches and crowds shouting, "Hosanna," which at root means, "Save us." The week unfolds with Jesus washing the feet of his disciples and sharing a meal with them. Disciples who then abandon, deny, and betray him, leading to his being arrested and put to death. The week ends on Easter with women going to the tomb where his body was laid, only to find the tomb empty. The 4 Gospels of the Bible, where the earliest accounts of the life and death of Jesus are found, differ on what happened next. The earliest gospel is that of Mark, which was written before the other 3, and it has two endings. It's kind of like you can choose your own adventure. Two endings. One ends with the empty tomb. The other ends with the resurrected Jesus appearing to Mary Magdalene and the disciples before being taken up into heaven. So have you ever been at a family gathering when events of days gone by are recalled, maybe a wedding, a funeral, or a vacation, and everyone there has a slightly different version of what happened? The gospel accounts are kind of like that, except that they aren't even eyewitness accounts. They were oral stories told around campfires and kitchen tables before being written down decades later. What we know for sure is that the death of Jesus and the events leading up to it left a lasting impression on his followers. The days, weeks, months, years, and now centuries after his death, followers of Jesus, religious thinkers, scholars, and theologians have tried to make meaning of these events. Hosea Ballou was one such person. Raised by his sisters and their widower father on a farm in rural New Hampshire, where spring is also known as mud season. Young Hosea loved to challenge the prevailing orthodoxy of the time and the theory of atonement that his father preached, which held that sin, another word we don't use often in this sanctuary, Hosea argued against his father's doctrine that sin was an infinite crime against God, that called for infinite satisfaction through the sacrifice of God himself. Young Hosea saw things differently. He reasoned that if there were two children, one of whom had muddy feet and one whose feet were clean, that God would love them both the same. That even if God was angry, that wouldn't change God's love. That God would not impose infinite misery on account of mistakes made. Hosea Ballou grew up and became a Universalist preacher. He expanded on those early conversations with his father and published a treatise on atonement. Wesley tells me that he went out and bought the book and is slogging his way through it. But in it, what Ballou did was he reversed the direction of the atonement, proposing that the death of Jesus calls humanity to atonement and reconciliation with God. By living in accordance with God's love, that it is God's love that is infinite, and therefore everyone would be taken up into heaven. In Ballou's words, the belief that the great Jehovah was offended with his creatures to the degree that nothing but the death of Christ or the endless misery of mankind could appease his anger is an idea that has done more injury to the Christian religion than the writings of all its opposers for many centuries. One of our contemporary Unitarian Universalist theologians, Rebecca Parker, and her co-author Rita Nakashima Brock put a finer point on it in their book, Proverbs of Ashes. They say, at the center of Western Christianity is the story of the cross, which claims God the Father required the death of his Son to save the world. We believe this theological claim sanctions violence. We seek a different theological vision. In other words, we need a theology of resurrection that does not sanction violence. I believe our Unitarian and Universalist ancestors gave us one. Hosea Ballou, like many of his Unitarian contemporaries, believed that Jesus was human, like us, a great teacher and a great prophet, born as we all are with a spark of the divine within. Resurrection isn't something that happens only when we die, ushering us into a blissful afterlife. It isn't an event, but a practice. Resurrection is any time we come more fully alive, when we awaken to our own divinity and the divinity within each and every person we encounter. It is awakening to our own power and the unique gifts that each of us have. To practice resurrection is to use our power and our gifts to make of this earth a garden, the paradise that it was meant to be. When Jesus rode into Jerusalem on a donkey, it was likely a protest, a subversive act of humility and nonviolence in face of the powers and principalities of the Roman Empire. It served as a call to atonement, a call to his people to reconcile with their God, to overthrow the bonds of oppression, and to resurrect the spirit of love within their community. We practice resurrection each time we awaken to the spirit of love moving within us, a love that moves us to action. We practice resurrection each time we challenge the prevailing orthodoxies of our day, when we challenge orthodoxies that sanction violence, when we speak out against oppression. We practice resurrection each time we resist and oppose laws that deny rights, laws that endanger our trans and non-binary siblings and their families. We practice resurrection each time we resist and oppose laws that deny the right of choice in matters of reproduction. We practice resurrection each time we resist and oppose laws that erode public education, laws that block access to knowledge, laws that ban books. We practice resurrection each time we resist and oppose the school-to-prison pipeline that incarcerates a disproportionate number of our Black and brown siblings. We practice resurrection each time we oppose the war that is killing innocent Palestinians every day. We practice resurrection each time we wash each other's feet, each time we break bread together. We practice resurrection every time we use our gifts to bring more peace, more love, and more understanding into the world. In closing today, I offer these words of Rebecca Parker. Your gifts, whatever you discover them to be, can be used to bless or curse the world. The mind's power, the strength of the hands, the reaches of the heart, the gift of speaking, listening, imagining, seeing, waiting. Any of these can serve to feed the hungry, bind up wounds, welcome the stranger, praise what is sacred, do the work of justice, or offer love. Any of these can draw down the prison door, hoard bread, abandon the poor, obscure what is holy, comply with injustice, or withhold love. You must answer this question: what will you do with your gifts? Choose to bless the world. None of us alone can save the world. Together is another possibility waiting. My friends, on this Palm Sunday, we began with stars. May we practice resurrection with each time we look to the stars and see possibilities greater than what we currently know. When we look to the stars and remember our ancestors who bequeathed us this faith, when we look to the stars and see ourselves there, made of the same stuff, made of stardust, divinity incarnate in human flesh. May we practice resurrection. May it be so. Amen, and blessed be.